my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.
If you could isolate a single thought within the mind of God and then begin to trace it out, you would never find its end.
Who has known the mind of the Lord, so as to instruct him?
What no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. These are the things God has revealed to us by his Spirit.
The whole pilgrimage that you go through in your Christian life, in your sanctification, is a pilgrimage by which we are seeking to increase the love of God with our minds.
Explaining spiritual realities with Spirit-taught words.
The only way you can be transformed is with a new mind.
But we have the mind of God.
You're listening to Ravel, and this is a Thread Talk with Dr. Chris.
Well, hello everybody. This is Dr. Chris coming to you solo here. A little bit strange, a little bit different. But we had been talking about some time ago and teasing the idea of expanding the show in some ways and providing some different offerings for you as the listener. And you are currently experiencing the first episode of one of these newer offerings, something that we're going to be calling Thread Talks, and we'll come back to that and talk about that a little more in just a moment, but kind of just take a moment to apologize. We had something of a month-long hiatus there, and we are sincerely sorry for that. We are both still alive and well. We've received a couple concerned emails asking if everything was okay, and what the radio silence was about. But basically, just we've been very busy. I, as most of you know, I'm pastoring a church now. I also have a 7-month-old son, Simon, who's wonderful and I love, but takes a lot of time. I'm teaching at 2 schools now, Trinity College here, and also New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and just staying very busy with a lot of things. And then Basil, he's herding cats and farming emus, and a prolific podcaster, and he has been jet setting and traveling the world, and you'll hear some more about that in some coming episodes. But some things just kind of got away from us. It was hard for the two of us to get our schedules to align to where we could record, and one of the things, in order to continue to provide consistency for you as the listener, those of you who are supporting us with your subscriptions to the show, and some of you who are patrons, we want to make sure that we're being respectful of that. So I figured, even if we can't get together, I can always sit down behind a microphone and talk about some things. So in these Thread Talks, that's basically what it's going to be. It's just going to be me kind of talking through some of the curiosities, perhaps of the Christian faith, of theology, of the Bible, kind of some of the ideas that just bounce around in my head sometime, and just kind of talking through that. And you'll bear with me as I kind of just fumble and meander through this whole thing, but I thought it would be pretty interesting and worthwhile. And of course, we'll see how it goes. If it's well received and people like it, we'll keep on doing it. If not, if you say, I can't stand to just listen to you talking into a microphone, Dr. Chris, bring back Basil, then we'll can it. But if nothing else, it's still fun for me. I really appreciate being able to do it, and hopefully there are some of you out there who are going to find this entertaining, edifying, and uplifting. So that's the idea behind it, kind of the reason, rather. The idea, the name Thread Talk, a little take on TED Talk, if you couldn't pick that up, and basically just a little talk. These will be probably pretty brief, in the realm of somewhere probably 30 to 45 minutes, I'm assuming. It's a lot easier to get through all of your thoughts when you're not dialoguing back and forth and having other ideas interjected and things like that. So they'll probably be pretty short, I think. And just kind of be talking through some things. Thread Talk, though, of course, the whole idea of the show, Ravel, we have our logo there. It looks like a little ball of yarn, and it is kind of, the idea that all of these thoughts, kind of these ideas, these scriptural concepts, these doctrines, all of these things that we examine, investigate, explore as believers, it kind of like a thread, and when you roll it all up and ball it up, you find them overlapping and touching and kind of getting knotted and twisted and tangled. And kind of the idea, one of the premises of the show when we first started was to be able to kind of ravel that ball and find an individual string, and to be able to kind of trace that out and explore it in isolation, and then see how that overlaps back on top of some of these other points of consideration sometimes. So in these thread talks, the idea is to be very specific in the subject matter that we're covering, and try to trace out essentially a single thought or concept or idea that we might find in theology. And I kind of had something of a vision of this one time. Most of you know I have a Baptist background. The church that I am currently pastoring, we are considered Baptist, although you might not suspect it if you were to come in and join us on a Sunday morning. But I come from a Baptist background, so these supernatural things like visions and dreams and all of that, we tend to shy away from that. If you were talking about some kind of generalization about the Baptist church. I don't find myself to be a very typical Baptist, but anyhow, I was in a time of meditation and in a time of prayer, and I was kind of getting this picture of coming before the throne of God, right? Like that's when you're coming into a time of prayer. We're told that we should approach the throne of grace boldly, and that's what we do. That by the empowerment of the Spirit and through the atoning work of Jesus, we can come right to the very throne of God. And as I was kind of picturing, kind of having a fantasy about what that might look like, I get this picture of God, and of course, Scripture helps to color that. What does that look like? And kind of whatever, God, the throne, being made of lapis and being surrounded by a sea of, what looks like glass, and all of these different sorts of imagery, and the angels, flying and shouting back and forth to each other, and all of this. And one of these particular occasions when I'm praying for one reason or another, one of the images that I got in my mind was from Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah is brought right into the throne room. And he talks about in the year that King Uzziah died, that he was teleported, he was translated into the throne room of God, that he saw God seated on the throne, high and lifted up. And it says that the train of his robe filled the entire throne room. And I started thinking about what that might look like. I started wondering, like, I wonder what God's robe, even looks like. And for whatever reason, I became very fixated on the idea of his robe. And I started thinking, I wonder what kind of material, is it cotton or wool or some kind of tweed? Like what is it? Something we've never seen before, and I kind of like just in my imagination, and whether it was governed by the Spirit or not, I don't know. I presume that it was in that moment. I felt very in tune with the Lord in this time, but I'm certainly not going to say that this is any kind of doctrine or this was from the Lord. I'm just telling you what I was kind of experiencing. And, it was like I kind of had this up close sort of look, like I zoomed into kind of the robe of the Lord, like his gown, what he was wearing, the train of his robe, and I started to see it being made of these fibers, these threads. And if you've ever seen a microscopic image of any kind of fabric, you know that in every strand that we might perceive to be a single strand, it's made up of hundreds of even smaller strands, and then you get down to the molecular level, and who knows how many layers deep that actually goes. But in this little fantasy of mine, I saw a single thread, and then I was thinking, what is this even made out of, or what is it constructed from? And I just got this crazy idea, like, what if it is that within the robe of God, or within the train of his robe, it's not just ordinary, like everything about God has to be extraordinary and infinitely incredible, even down to the clothes, quote unquote, that he's wearing, however it actually is or happens, but even down to his robe and the threads that make it up. And I started thinking, what would his robe even be made out of? And then I started to think, wouldn't it be interesting if in the Lord's robe, if on the threads of his robe there was, printed all of the mysteries of the universe, if it was that he actually clothed himself in this robe that actually contained all of the answers and all of the explanations to all of the questions in the universe, that he wears them as a garment. And for whatever reason, I started to think about that, and then I thought, I wonder, and if you could, start to read one of these thoughts, thinking about where would it ever end, and how far would it go, and what would it say, and particularly, how long could I trace this thing out for? And one of the interesting details in that vision that Isaiah gets is he says that the train of his robe, the train of his garment, it filled the whole throne room. And this is kind of going back to some of you might have heard a teaching on this before. There's the ancient Near Eastern kind of concept of a conquering king. And when a king would conquer another nation, or he would conquer another king, the conquering king would go to the defeated king, and he would take some of that king's, the train from that king's robe, and he would claim it as his own, and he would stitch a piece of that king's robe, or the train of his robe, onto his own train, basically as a show of authority, to demonstrate that he has conquered this other king, and then that king is now subject to him, or perhaps he's been executed in a number of scenarios. But it's a demonstration of his authority, the fact that he has conquered his adversaries. And when Isaiah is saying the train of his robe, it filled the whole room. What that's saying is his train is so large, it's so vast that he has conquered all of the enemies. And of course, in Isaiah's time, Uzziah had just died, so there's all of this uncertainty. There's no king on the throne. We are concerned, and while they are concerned, because their earthly king is dead, they look up and they see the heavenly king. He's still high and lifted up, and he is demonstrating through having this enormous train on his robe that he is in control, that he is still sovereign, that he is still the authority. And that train then of his robe, when you start to think about, how many enemies has the Lord vanquished, the answer is, of course, all of them. And there is the distinct possibility that his garments could stretch on infinitely. And it got me to thinking about this line from C.S. Lewis from the Chronicles of Narnia. In the last book, when all of the characters finally reach heaven, as it were, the real heaven. It's the unicorn is standing there and ready to enter, and he's talking about his excitement, and he says that they should, enter in and go further up and further in. And you may have heard this before. That expression, further up, further in, and it is essentially a call from God to come further up into heaven, to come further into heaven, to come further into fellowship with him. And one of the incredible things about our experience of God and who God is eternal. I've talked about this on the show before. He is eternal. When we think about things being eternal, we often think about it in the sense of time, of existence, and God is certainly eternal in that sense. He never started to exist. He will never stop to exist. He has always existed. So in the realm of time, and if you can even consider it when you get into eternity, it's a whole nother conversation, but he is eternal, no beginning and no end, always is, always was, always will be. I am that I am, the first and the last, all of that. But he is eternal in all of his qualities and all of his attributes, in every single thing about him. He is eternal. So that means that his love is eternal. His capacity to love is eternal. It means that his grace has no end. There's no limit to it. His strength, his patience, all that he is, there is no end to it. And in the same way, if you were to, and as the introduction to this series goes here, to these thread talks, those kind of sound bites that are in there, and just a real quick shout out to a good friend of the show, Learbag, for helping me get that put together. Appreciate you, buddy. Thank you so much for all your hard work. But in that, it's, you hear the kind of the thought, if we were able to isolate a single thought within the mind of God. So if you could, in God's infinite mind, if you could ask him to just, Lord, can I just hear what you have to say about just this one particular issue? Just this one thing. Pick a thing, whatever it is, the color blue. Tell me about that. He has the capacity and the ability to speak on that and talk about its significance, talk about why he created it, talk about what it means to him, reveal infinite truth through it, and he could do that forever and ever and ever. And you could trace out a single thought and never find its end. And you could never exhaust his wisdom. You could never exhaust the information that is in his mind. And that is one of the things that I am looking forward to the most in getting to heaven, is that we will have unfettered access to God, to his mind. We can go to him. We can go to the source of all things good and wise and true, and we can sit and we can ask him, explain whatever it is that you want explained, And he will explain it. And each moment that passes in that explanation gets better than the last continually. And this, again, kind of goes back to that idea of the further up and the further in, that our capacity for experiencing and knowing the person of God continues to expand all through eternity, that we continue to be filled more and more with his glory, with his goodness, that it continues, the revelation of who he is can magnify with each passing moment of eternity, and it would never, ever get exhausted, ever. And that is just so incredibly exciting to me. The thought of being able to begin in that journey the day that it happens, but then I have to remind myself that I'm already beginning, that it already has begun, that this life right now is essentially a warm-up. It's essentially a rehearsal for what is coming in eternity. And this is one of the reasons that I love so much to consider the things of God, to try to explore the mind of God through the word that he's already given us, through his word, the Bible, and through time in prayer and time in meditation. And when you can grab a hold of that, when you can come into contact with the mind of God, there is nothing else like it. And it was interesting because I was thinking about this, and this, I think this made it into a sermon on a Sunday morning here. But as I was thinking about all of these different things, right, you could ask the Lord about anything, and he could, never stop talking about it. He could never stop telling you about the significance of, the color blue, or squirrels, or hydrogen, or anything else. He could make it interesting and incredible forever. And then it just kind of dawned on me that if I should ever have the audacity to ask the Lord, what do you think about me? The thing that is truly incredible and truly mind-shattering is that the Lord could talk about me, and the Lord could talk about you forever. That he could tell you his thoughts towards you. He could explain to you his love for you. He could explain to you your eternal purpose and the eternal consequence of your life. He could show it to you, and he could unroll it before your eyes, and you would never, ever see the end of it. And I believe that is one of the things that is going to happen in heaven, that it will be a continual revelation to us, not only of who God is, of his goodness, of his wisdom, of his greatness. It's going to be that. But I think also in his infinite grace and in his infinite goodness, he includes us in that story. He includes us in that eternal picture. And there is something for us to be doing. There's something for us to be discovering about ourselves in relation to God forever. That he has eternal purpose for you, and an eternal plan for you. It doesn't end when your life here on earth ends. It actually is just beginning. And that is something that really, really excites my heart, and that I'm really, really looking forward to doing. And it's kind of one of the purposes of this show, of these thread talks, that I kind of want to begin to take some of these ideas and see how, far we can trace them out. And of course, 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, in comparison to eternity is not even worth mentioning, but it plants a seed, and there are so many of them germinating in my mind, and I would love to just kind of, spread that seed around. Very interestingly, That is what the word seminary means. Comes from it. It seems a little vulgar sometimes in English, but semen is a seed. And it is a seed bed. Seminary is a seed bed. It is a bed where these seeds are planted. And as these seeds become planted in your mind, not that we will ever, get to the end of any one of these issues in 30 minutes or an hour, but my hope is that it plants a seed somewhere in the mind of any one of you as the listener that continues to germinate forever and ever and ever, continues to grow. And when I say forever, I mean forever. That in this life, these things start to take root in your heart and in your mind. And when we are translated into the next life, it is continuing to grow from, something that took place here. So each and every one of us, our lives are of eternal consequence. And we need to use, the influence that we have. We need to use whatever it is that the Lord has given us to affect change for all of eternity. And that's kind of the idea here, to plant some seeds and to start tracing out some threads that we will be tracing out forever and ever. And I'm really looking forward to what might come in this show. I have plenty of ideas of things that I'm excited to begin discussing and to begin talking about. If you have any ideas, things that you would like to hear me wax about, or things that have been on your mind and you want to share a seed, I can read that and kind of respond to it. Please feel free to send an email, contact@ravelpodcast.com. And I would love to have this be sort of like a time of conversation with some of you out there. So that's kind of, the big picture. And then, of course, the focus here in another one of the offerings, I think, of these thread talks is that from time to time, I've talked to some folks who are listeners to the show, and it's a little bit of a grab bag sometimes, Ravel, where you don't really know what you're going to get when you tune in. Is this going to be like a good sound, Bible teaching, Bible study discussion here? Is this going to be, are we going to have a really, really interesting guest on? Are we going to have a heretic for a guest on who, everything that they say makes me grind my teeth and clench my fists? There's a lot of unpredictability. So in these thread talks, it's going to be predictable, if you will. It's going to be strictly orthodox. We're not going to be talking to or even probably about any heresies. No heretics, no heresies. It's going to be strictly orthodox. It will probably be a little more abstract and a little more philosophical, coming from a place of always, biblical orthodoxy, always starting there, but probably getting out into the abstract. Like even I started today kind of with this vision, stuff like that. Maybe not so grounded all the time, but a little bit ethereal, if you will, in our considerations. So that, and then of course, like I said, open to any sorts of suggestions. So any curiosities that are out there in any of your minds, feel free to run those by me. And I was sharing about the idea of this show with my younger brother, Adam. Shout out to Adam. He's out there somewhere. I don't know if he even listens to the show actually at all. But I was talking to him about these, thread talks and kind of what the show was going to be about. Gave him a little preview of the intro music there. And I said, yeah, I want to kind of try to explore the mind of God. And he said something to the effect of, wow, that's pretty brave. And I said, yeah, it is. I'm certainly not going to claim to come to any certain conclusions about things. Of course, if you guys are listeners of the show, you know that very seldom, do I even do that in matters that are in the biblical text, in the black and white. There's lots of room for interpretation. I certainly have strong opinions about things. Very seldom make definitive claims about things unless those pertain to, the person and work of Christ. There we have to. But outside of that, lots of gray areas. If you know our theological triage, our dogmas, doctrines, and beliefs, most of the stuff, kind of in the area of doctrine and sometimes belief, those are most of the areas that we talk about. The areas of dogma, incredibly important, but usually limited to what we believe about Jesus and what we believe about the Bible. Of course, you can go, those things could take you in an infinite number of directions as well, but you can really kind of consolidate those down to Jesus Christ, his person and his work. Anyhow, he says, yeah, that's a pretty ambitious or bold sort of thing to do. And I said, yeah, it is, and it kind of brings up the question, like, is it even like, is it a frivolous sort of pursuit? Is it even possible? How can we even claim to know the mind of God at all? Where would I even get off, saying, I'm going to talk about the mind of God? Well, what do you know about the mind of God, Chris? Is the question that could be asked. And I think it's really interesting because we have an answer to this in the text of Scripture. In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, Paul is talking, and he has this beautiful introduction, in 1 Corinthians, in the first chapter, about kind of he's kind of laying out something of a defense, of himself and kind of his ministry, as he's going to have this really kind of scathing letter that he writes to the church at Corinth. But he, is kind of giving a defense almost of his ability to speak with authority to this church. And it's also an exhortation to the church that they also should have the ability to discern, that they also should be able to tell right from wrong, that they, in some ways, in a lot of ways, shouldn't even need Paul to be explaining these sorts of things to them. And he says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. We're going to do like 10 verses here, probably starting in verse 6. He says, we do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age, or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we declare God's wisdom, a mystery that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it. If they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. However, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. These are the things God has revealed to us by his Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except their own spirit within them? And in the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. What we have received is not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may understand what God has freely given us. This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual realities with Spirit-taught words. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit. The person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things, but such a person is not subject to merely human judgments. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? but we have the mind of Christ. And, I think that passage of Scripture is, it poses that, very reasonable kind of question that my brother posed to me, like, how can you even claim to talk about the mind of God? And this is the same sort of question that was coming from the church at Corinth towards Paul. It was, they were questioning and challenging his authenticity and his authority as an apostle of Jesus. And he said, basically, listen, God has given us his Spirit. We have been made one with the Spirit of God. And what he says is it is a person's spirit. It is a person's, their own mind that knows them, that helps them to understand their own thoughts. It is within their spirit. And he says that is the Spirit that God has given to us. He has given to us his Spirit. So if he's given us his Spirit, then we have to reason that we actually can rightly come to an understanding of some of the things that are going on in the mind of God. That it is actually possible for us through prayer, through fasting, through meditation, through the study of God's Word, through time spent alone with him, on our faces, before him, humbling ourselves, that it is actually possible that God would reveal his mind, his thoughts to us. And that's just so cool to me. That is just one of the most exciting things, that God would share his sovereign and completely magnificent and marvelous thoughts in his mind with each one of us. And that's kind of what I want to be doing in this show. So yeah, it seems perhaps a little bit bold. It might seem a little bit audacious to say that we're going to be talking about the mind of God. What can you possibly say about the mind of God? Well, if you spend time in his presence, if you spend time in his word, if you spend time humbled before him, there's a lot actually that we can say about the mind of God. And of course, always with the caveat, you can take it all with a grain of salt. Test it all against Scripture yourself. Take it to the Lord yourself in prayer, and see what he doesn't reveal to you. But ultimately, I hope that this is also something that just kind of spurs everyone on to their own sort of journey of discovery. It'll be me kind of sharing about mine, but the hope is that it, bears fruit, that people don't just live vicariously through myself, through any of your favorite teachers or pastors or podcasters or authors. You're not having your Christian experience through them, but in a sense, you're doing it with them, and they are just inspiring you and pushing you. And that's what I find, about all of my favorite preachers, my favorite scholars, my favorite authors, that they are, it's like a push. It's like they're leading me into a deeper relationship. And rather than me just kind of hanging on to their coattails and having the experience that they had, it excites my heart and it excites my mind to go and have my own. And that's what I hope kind of comes from this. So as promised, here we are somewhere right around 38 minutes, and gonna bring it in here. Won't go too long. Just wanted to, in this first episode of the Thread Talks here, just kind of explain to you what the plan is, what the idea behind the whole thing is, kind of where we're going to be going, and, hopefully generate a little bit of excitement. So if you are, interested in this, feel free to send us an email, contact@ravelpodcast.com. Again, big apology for the month of kind of no activity there. But one of the great things about this is I can promise you, if Basil and I are unable to get together to record any episodes, you'll at least be hearing my voice. I can commit to doing that for all of you guys. We also have some really exciting things that are coming. We're going to start off the new year with a new series, and I will wait to make that announcement with Basil. Won't do that on my own, but we do have a series plan that's going to start in January, and I think you're going to be really excited about it. So anyway, lots of really, really fun and exciting things going on. I'm so pumped for the future, the heaven. I'm excited for the future here on Earth. I'm excited for the future of this show, and I hope that you all are too. So I thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will be talking with all of you again very, very soon.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing, email us at contact@ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.